Greetings and salutations. Thank you for lending an ear to The Voice of the Times, the Sunday, January 3, 2021. For today's editorial, Government Not Moving Fast Enough on Vaccines. The Manila Times ran a story the other day that some 50 countries have started vaccinating their denizens against COVID-19, but unfortunately the Philippines was not among them. Earlier, it was also reported that this country should receive its first delivery of vaccines around March, while the story mentioned earlier stated that they may not arrive until the second quarter. Truth be told, the government's record so far against the pandemic has been mixed. On the positive side, the lockdown imposed, as painful as it was, seemed effective in slowing down community spread. Even now, the government continues to be cautious in maintaining the quarantine in several areas, most notably in Metro Manila. Also, the authorities mandated that people wear face masks and face shields while in public, along with the other typical precautions such as regularly washing hands and maintaining public distance. However, the authorities were slow in setting up quarantine and testing facilities, not to mention contact tracing measures. Good thing that the number of local cases and deaths have remained comparatively low throughout this ordeal, perhaps thanks to the lockdown. It may not have been universally followed all the time, but people complied enough to make a difference. That same slow reaction by the authorities seems evident in acquiring vaccines. Granted, most of the countries that have started vaccinations are more affluent, including nations in North America, Western Europe, and in Southeast Asia, Singapore. But people might scratch their heads when countries such as Algeria, Costa Rica, and West Africa Guinea are already in various stages of their vaccination program, while the Philippines is not. That frustration among people may be the backstory to the smuggled vaccines used on members of the Presidential Security Group, or PSG. While their impatience with the slow process of legally acquiring vaccines for their men may be understandable, what they did was wrong and likely illegal. The PSG's action is actually illogical and indefensible. If the objective was to better protect the president, then it would make more sense to have Mr. Rodrigo Duterte himself receive a shot. It seems more plausible that the PSG men were only looking out for themselves. For sure, the PSG should be investigated. For one, the authorities need to determine the details, including which vaccine was used on its personnel. If they had acquired an insufficiently tested one or did anything wrong that makes its people sick later on, the PSG would be compromising its mission to protect those in its detail, including the president. If nothing bad happens to the PSG, who received the illegal shots, jumping the line highlights the inequities that still exist in our society. To quote the late Jose Avellino, "What are we in power for?" The issues raised here are relevant because the pandemic is far from over. In many places around the world, the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths continue to rise rapidly. Worse, the virus has mutated now for at least the fourth time, so that it poses a greater threat by being more transmissible and deadly. Several health experts have tried to reassure people that the vaccines now being rolled out may be effective against the new strains, but the reality is that those are assumptions based on anecdotal evidence. There is no large data yet to support that opinion. The point is that COVID-19 will remain with us for the foreseeable future. The good news is that countries all over, including the Philippines, are learning to live with this health threat in spite of the perils it imposes. The bad news is that new health threats may emerge later on. COVID-19 may even develop into an even more virulent strain, and unless our government learns to react more quickly and effectively against future threats, people will suffer more. So far, the Philippines has been somewhat lucky based on the local numbers. The relatively low figures mask the slow response and poor or misguided decisions, or at least make people tolerant of the government's lapses. We may not be so lucky the next time. And that's the editorial for Sunday, January 3, 2021. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to our digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and listen to The Voice of the Times.